Hello. So before I get to the goal setting activity, I wanted to just touch base on a few points that we discussed during class. One of the biggest takeaways I got from the podcast was just kind of the baseline of setting expectations and setting goals. And if we're setting goals without considering the past or the current baseline, it's not really going to set the employee up for success. So a good example is if a BCBA is closing out session notes on average of 5 business days after the session, right? Ideally, we want the session notes closed out every single day, so within 24 business hours, right? But if you look at that baseline, going from 5 business days to within 24 hours may not be a reasonable goal due to the current baseline. So, depending on the situation and the goal, it is important to consider those baseline levels and then maybe creating smaller goals before you get to larger goals. So, starting next week, all session notes need to be closed out within 3 days. After that, 2 days. After that, within 1 business day. In all cases, systematically going up or down like a hierarchy is not always appropriate, right? So, like, if insurance is saying these need to be closed out the day of, creating a 3-tier systematic plan may not be practical because there is an expectations in place um, set outside of the organization. So that's also something to consider when developing systematic goals. One thing you did mention was creating like a failure plan. So what happens if this goal fails? And truthfully, kind of like I think it was Joseph who said this. He was like, I don't know if it was Joseph, but one of my classmates said that usually I don't create a failure plan until we actually start to fail, right? So when I'm creating an intervention for a client and things are going well, I'm not really thinking about a failure plan. I'm thinking about, progress plan, what happens when they meet this goal or what happens next. But then the challenge is when they start to fail or when the system starts to fail, we don't really know what to do because we haven't proactively planned for this. So this is something that we can do better on as a field, or at least I can do better as a BCBA, especially with those clients who have not extreme behavior plans, but behavior plans for like severe situations like crisis plans, right? So like if this crisis plan does not work, what is the next plan? Are we referring out? Are we bringing in a specialist? Are we putting 2 therapists on one client? So thinking about things like that. So for our project or our scenario, we wanted to kind of create a goal for the latency between the initial client call and then the actual assessment call. So the goal I created was upon completion of the potential client call, the employee will call the client within 24 business hours to confirm scheduling the assessment. The assessment will be scheduled within 3 business days from the completion of the potential client call and 100% of opportunities. So the different goal setting considerations are level of employee input, communication of goal to employees, type of goal, individual versus group level goals, desired change, direction, contingencies, and intervention combined with the goal. So the level of employee input, so I would say this is like a high level of employee input. It's really dependent on the individual doing that initial onboarding call. So I would say it is a high level of employee input. The communication of goal to the employees. So this can just be communicated via email or Teams. It doesn't necessarily need to be communicated like on a call. It's not that sensitive of a goal, right? It's not something that's too crazy or too out of the ordinary. So this can be communicated via email or Teams or whatever documentation platform. And then this can also be listed like somewhere in like a SOP or, whatever document system that the company is using for expectations. This can be also placed there. The individual versus group level goals. So this can be both, right? So this can be an individual goal. So the employee has to be the one making the call and scheduling it. But from an organizational level, we can look at those averages from a group, right? So, hey, on average, as an organization, the average time it took was 4 days, right? And the goal right now is 3 business days. So what can we do as a group to get on board with this goal? The desired behavior change direction is to reduce the time it takes to schedule the assessment and complete the assessment, right? So ultimately, we want to expedite that latency so that we're not delaying the assessment process. The contingencies tied to meeting or not meeting the goal. Um, so it really depends. Like if they want to put a reinforcement system in place, they can. But I think in this case, this is just the expectation, right? So with every job expectation, there's not always going to be like a reinforcement in place. Like, oh, if you do this, you get XYZ, right? So I guess the contingency for not meeting the goal would probably be some type of punishment procedure, unfortunately. So like first, if the employee's not meeting the goal, try to collaborate with them, see what the barriers are and how to fix those barriers. And then if it continues, we may have to go into some type of performance modification, whether that's a performance improvement plan or a write up or whatever the case is, depending on the organization. But of course, we would try to mitigate the barriers before implementing anything like that so it's not as punitive. Um, and then the intervention combined with the goal, right? So what are we going to do to push this goal forward? We can't just put a goal in place. We need some type of intervention. So we probably would do some type of training beforehand. So I would say I love BST. So some type of BST training. So, hey, this is what you would do. Like explaining the process and then modeling it, how to make those calls, and then following up with the individual. So I would say BST as intervention in combination with this goal.